This is Long Run Archives number 11. I think if we publish this according to plan, it'll be the 200th episode of Single Track, which it's still a random number, but I think that's a cool milestone. And I think the goal is to get to 1,000. Not that you should just aim for any random number, but I think it's more representative of just trying to stick with something for as long as possible and go through the trials and tribulations of commitment. And yeah, actually, I'm glad we're having this conversation, because I was thinking about it the other day, like how much has this podcast evolved, or how much have you or I evolved as content creators? And I was actually trying to survey what I've done in the last year and a half. And I've actually been slightly disappointed that I've stayed relatively one-dimensional. And I would say since working with you, and since we started doing our trips, like going to Bandera and Black Canyon for the live stream and Cocodona, I felt reinvigorated to try to get good at things like video and bring GoPros certain places and think like a photographer, think like a videographer, and try to add that to the skill set. So I think one of the unanticipated benefits of starting to work with AirVipe and stuff like this is it doesn't just force you out of your comfort zone, but it surrounds you with people that you realize, okay, they're doing that. It's super cool. But just by virtue of being in the same room with certain people, you want to get their skill set. And then you find out it's just as cool as you imagine. So
yeah, totally.
That's what made me think about 200 episodes.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely have not been a part of all 200 episodes, but
You've been a part of a lot though.
A good handful, more than I ever expected. I mean, I never thought I would do more than one podcast in my life, but turns out it's actually pretty fun. Yeah, I've never been more out of my comfort zone in terms of doing things that I've never done before, more in the last 12 months than probably at any point ever in my life.
If you could list off your top 2 or 3 skills that you want to pick up in the media content creation space by the end of 2023, so not necessarily mastery, but baseline proficiency, what would they be?
I would love to learn more about more professional videography, and capturing great video and photo, so that way I can also rip together, an amazing highlight reel, or even just an Instagram reel. I would love to be able to make something very professional looking, kind of totally on my own, not for the sake of not wanting help, but because I want to learn how to do all those things. I want to be able to pick up a pretty nice camera and know how to use every bit of it. Cause I know I have a DSLR, I'm completely underutilizing it. So I would like to learn more of that, and then, learn more on the production side of things regarding, whether that's us doing some of these live and learning the live production, or even just in the post-production of making things look cooler, which, definitely getting into the shoe review channel. That's something that has been really a great learning process. Cause again, it was I'll do a written shoe review because I know how to write. But filming stuff and making a video out of it, I have no idea how to do that. So it's been fun to learn, and I want to keep learning more about that.
That's awesome. I would say my top 2, the first one is storytelling. I want to absolutely master. I shouldn't say master. I want to get proficient at the mechanics of storytelling. I feel like that phrase, and even what we consider to be storytelling in our own sport, tends to be kind of carelessly tossed around, and what we call a story is not necessarily a story. So I want to master the mechanics of narrative arc and rising action and climax and conclusion, and figuring out what classic formats work for our sport. And so I think that involves studying a lot of people in Hollywood who write scripts and stuff like that. And then the second thing, you already mentioned it, is there's actually, by the way, I'll link it in the show notes. There's a great Rich Roll podcast episode with this guy. His name's Robert McKee, who wrote this book called Story, and he is the script writing teacher for all of the great Hollywood TV show, movie producers, script writers of our time. So the Aaron Sorkins of the world and stuff like that. And he was just on Rich Roll, and I think that's a great episode for folks that are trying to connect the dots to our sport. And then the last one is understanding the equipment and the acoustics and the audio, and how to record and edit a live show, I think is cool. And it's crazy that 2 or 3 years ago, that was for most people the default in the podcasting world. And then COVID brought us to virtual, and some of us are native to the COVID world, myself included. So that's what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah, you came up in this industry a bubble boy, and now you're gonna have to
great movie, by the way.
Actual people. I don't think I've ever seen Bubble Boy.
It's actually pretty good. I'm wondering. I don't know if we'll do it in this episode, but maybe we should try to have sort of an unofficial competition where we see if we can sneak movie references by each other within the context of.
I don't think that should be a competition. We'll get like way out of control with it. I think we should just make it like the rule is you can throw movie references in, but I don't think there should be a number that we're like trying to hit, because it would be absurd. It needs to be more organic.
Where we left off last episode, I think we teased out the question, has the trail running culture conditioned pro athletes to not be aggressive about the finances of their pro career? And where we left off last time, you said you had a lot of thoughts about this. So take it away.
And it's funny. I actually don't have my notes up from the last episode. I'm kind of curious as to what I wrote down versus what I wrote down this time, because a week of just thinking about it, I could totally see myself changing my mind like 3 different times. But so has the trail running culture conditioned pro athletes to not be aggressive about the finances of their career? So like, I guess to rephrase that question. So it's like we're saying, or like we're asking if the previous culture or current culture of trail running, has it become kind of like the cool thing to try and dirtbag it? And I think even like a decade ago, that was the only way to be an ultra runner full time. Like, I'm not sure, like, how many people in 2010 were making 6 figures running ultra marathons? Like, maybe Killian, but like, was other than that, maybe 0 people. Not that you need to make 6 figures to comfortably live, but I don't think there was really any other way, because that's just how niche and small the sport of trail and ultra was, even, a decade or dozen years ago. And that, that kind of mentality definitely carried on, because I think it was kind of the like, do hard work, just like put your head down and grind kind of thing. And it was like kind of poo-pooed on to like, take a handout, basically being like extra sponsorship money or like do all the fancy things. It's like, yeah, I think there was kind of like ingrained in the culture of trail running of like, be as minimal as possible, especially like even like the footwear, I mean, paralleled that movement as well, where it's like you needed a water bottle, shorts, and barely shoes, and like you could be a professional ultra runner. I just think with how competitive the sport has gotten and how much more like research dollars have gone into the sport in terms of like actual scientific training philosophies, like nutrition, even the mental training, those are all things that you can now put more resources towards and get a lot back. In 2010, maybe you had money to go see like a dietitian or a nutritionist, but there wasn't any that were experts in ultra running that were like able to give you exactly what you need. And especially with just how much like that sort of stuff has grown in the last dozen years. I think the sport is approaching a spot where you can pretty easily make it a full-time job, with like how much is, just how much like you or I know, like we know what it would take to say like win UTMB. Like if I wanted to pursue that, it would be easier for me to pursue that if I quit every job that I had and got to go all in on running, because I know I could fill every minute of my day being a professional ultra runner.
Yeah.
But the other big problem with that, which it kind of, there's like a point in our show notes, is like the actual public, or I don't know if it's public, but like the contract awareness by these athletes still doesn't really exist. Like these athletes who could easily fill every minute of their day being a professional ultra runner aren't in a position to ask a brand or tell a brand, I can do this. That will cost you this much to support me. Like there's still a huge discrepancy between what runners could actually do as pro ultra runners and what they think they should be asking for in terms of like contract money. And that's partly due because like the majority of the sport is still athletes advocating for themselves for contracts. And that's very hard when everyone has to sign an NDA and they're not allowed to talk about their contract. So like no one knows what's a stupid number to ask. Cause like, I don't want to approach a brand and be like, hey, I'm looking for this much money. And they either laugh it off because they're like, you know, you're way too high. Like I'm walking into McDonald's and being like, I need to be paid $250,000 a year if I'm going to flip burgers. They'd be like, well, that's stupid. This person has no idea what they're talking about. Or if you do the opposite and you're like, I'm going to go be the CEO of some like, you know, couple $1 billion tech company. And you're like, I would love $20 an hour. Then they're like, sure. Okay. Like not take this person seriously either. So it's like, how do you know when you're actually hitting that right number? Because yeah, there's no like public knowledge of current trail contracts and what they are. So, you know, I think there's still some things that need to be ironed out for a lot of people to have the proper opportunity to go full-time pro at this. That was a long ramble.
No, and I was about to make a Big Daddy Hooters 10-year plan reference, but maybe that's for,
what is it? Don't die.
We're off to a good start.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
All right, you said a ton of really interesting stuff there. I made some notes. I want to take them one by one. The first thing you mentioned was about the dirt bagging. And I think there's a lot of different reasons why people dirt bag. One of them may be because they just don't have the resources to live life any other way, but they want to be around the sport, so they do it. But I also, in one sense, see dirt bagging as an act of aggression, just in the opposite direction, because these people are saying, I recognize the game that has to be played in this area of the sport. I don't agree with it. I'm anti-commercial. I'm going to go and just like live off the land and live as simply as possible. That to me is aggressive. So I guess I'm wondering, like, for the athletes that are trying to play the game, they are trying to affiliate with brands, they are trying to be on the straight and narrow, live the running equivalent of like a corporate lifestyle, or at least they want to play that game. Have those people historically been aggressive in your opinion, or have those people been more passive?
Gosh.
And by the way, I don't necessarily know the answer. I'm totally, we're riffing here.
Yeah. Cause there's definitely always in like solo sports, there's always the people that go against the grain. And like, that's kind of that historically, that was like all of trail and ultra running. Cause it was like you trying to pursue competitive trails was going against the grain of like racing a marathon.
Yep.
And now we're in that era of the sport where it's like you have that, you know, 205 marathoner mentality level of professionalism in this sport. And it's, I don't know, I think it's easier to have success when you have everyone in your corner just giving you everything you need to become the best at what you're trying to do. So which one's the more aggressive approach?
Right.
Like, I don't know.
I wonder, and again, I don't know the answer here, but I'm wondering if we looked at other sports that are in a similar position to trail running, where there's not really a sophisticated players association. There's no unions. There's no outsourcing of negotiation to somebody that's good at it. Are those sports in a pretty similar state where there are a few winners? There are a few people that are like middling in terms of surviving from a career standpoint, but the vast majority are professionals in name only.
Yeah. I mean, like what, can you think of any sports that have that many parallels where you can go out and practice it on your own without like any formal coaching or even like a gym or an arena or anything, and then show up to a competition and win it? Like archery, shooting, maybe. Like I could see someone from like, I could like, I mean, in
but
shooting,
that's changing
just
our sport, right?
What?
That's changed. Like, I mean, I would say that like 5 years from now, and this is just my speculation, like if you didn't come up with a coach, if you didn't come up with from like a formal running background, you're probably at a disadvantage.
Yeah, I would say so. There's always going to be those very few outliers who can be, self-coached and be towards the top, but I think those will always be outliers. But for the most part, like I think, to win these races, especially to win these big races, you're going to need to do kind of in a way as little thinking as possible and let someone else believe in you and kind of just tell you what to do from a training standpoint. I mean, looking at athletics, like that's where all the best success has come from. Like behind every great athlete has always been a great coach.
I guess I have two questions. The first question is like, what evidence would we need to see to show definitively that by and large, it is a pretty aggressive culture out there in terms of fighting for what you deserve, versus what evidence do we have to suggest that it's the other way around? It's more of a passive culture. And I'm only going based off of what I see on the contracts that are negotiated. Like I still think, and I think we're going to talk about this with the Pink Bike report later on in the conversation, but I would guess that the vast majority of contracts in our sport are still like $15,000 and below. A lot of in-name only contracts where it's like gear and travel and maybe some race coverage. And also I'm judging it based on social media, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a soliloquy here. I'm going to need your help filling in some of the meme action here because you're better at that than me. But like on the brand side, whenever they're announcing an athlete, it's muted but respectful. It's like, okay, welcome to the team, excited to work together. And then on the athlete side, when they're posting on Instagram, it's super submissive, over the top thankful. It's like, oh, so humbled to be here, so grateful for the opportunity, so thankful that you took a chance on me. It's always took a chance on me. And I want to make one of those memes where it's like on the one side, the athlete is praying to the brand logo with like a speech bubble above it with like the thankful stuff. And maybe the overhead, the title's like, thanks for taking a chance. And on the other side, it's like the brand, it's like the Hoka marketing people, they're doing like cannonballs into the pool and like a coin pops out and the title's like the chance :
Yeah, I know. I would love to see some of the deep accounting work of some of these big brands and like what percentage of their like yearly revenue is going into the pockets of the professional athletes that they support. I mean, yeah, like you said, it's like the execs are doing cannonballs into their pool of money, and like the one coin that happens to splash out and like, falls in someone's wallet, and they're like, yes, oh my gosh, but it's like, they had no idea. They never, this coin, it rolled out of the pool because it's an indoor pool, of course, because it's fancy. It rolled under the door, down the stairs, like out to the alley, and then like someone picked it up and they're like, this is amazing. So they never even saw the other pool. They had no idea that there is that much more money.
Spoiler alert, it was not a risk. They were not taking a chance on you. It's not like if, X
oh my
athlete,
gosh!
It's not like if X athlete underperforms, that marketing manager loses his job next year. These are not mistakes. These are not mistakes.
Oh my dude. Okay, so off of this first point, like talking point of the show, we could have easily like side tangented into like half of these other points, and the one that I actually was having a hard time writing anything about, I I'm going to pivot to it right now. What is the biggest scam in trail and ultra running right now? And it's professional contracts. That's what it is.
I basically wrote the same thing. I wrote, it's when athletes only get gear and travel covered and they call themselves pros.
Yeah.
That should be disallowed.
I know.
And a lot of the times the brands will be able to trade for it because it makes it easier to convince an athlete, I think, to sign for basically nothing if they get because the athletes, I mean, it's probably just human nature. It's like it's status signaling. They probably at the end of the day care more about saying that they're a pro athlete to their community than to be compensated like a pro athlete. I'm convinced of that.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's huge. One. And like, I'm sure there's the facade of, oh, I have to take this gear contract first before I can renegotiate for more money, which in some cases is true. Where like, you know, if you're good, but you're not the best, like, sure, maybe that's what maybe that's what you're worth, for, you know, lack of a better term. But yeah, like, but then like kind of going back to what you said, is that going pro? Is that professional, or is that just more like I am part of the brand ambassador team? And there's nothing wrong with that, I think, you know, but like, where is this line? Where's the line between a professional and a non-professional ultra runner?
There was this, I'm going into the Wayback Machine. I found a post from my buddy Jimmy Elam back in 2018, who is a local crusher here in the Wasatch. And it was a post he made just before the Quad Rock 50. He said, I've put in the time, I'm excited, and I'm ready to throw down with the pros and the ambassadors that consider themselves pros. And ever since I saw that line, it always just cracked me up. And it always brings me back to the point we're talking about here, which is just the massive discrepancy in our sport around labeling and just how out of whack it all is.
Yeah. And I guess some might argue it's because there's no governing body, like, you know, like in triathlon, like there's no pro card that you need to have as a, you know, trail and ultra runner. Like the closest that we have is like, if you want to try and make the world's team at Lake Sonoma or Formidable 50K or Breakneck, you better pay your $15 to become a USATF member. It's like, oh, well, I guess that's like all we have, except literally anyone could get that. Yeah. And like, maybe our sport just won't really ever, like maybe our sport won't ever have a defined professional, not professional. Maybe that doesn't matter. And what matters is who's winning the races.
We both agreed, which sucks because, again, agreement is not the basis of great content.
It's the worst.
I need you to shut me up here in a second. But I guess since this is a scam, and I looked it up on Webster's dictionary, a scam is it's a dishonest fraud. I think I got to pull this up again. Sometimes I don't know basic. Yeah, a dishonest scheme : a fraud. What's the fallout of this? Like if we're saying that this is the biggest scam, is there any consequence to that? Like, is it pulling the sport down in a negative way that this is being perpetuated on fans of the sport and even athletes of the sport?
So I don't think it necessarily negatively affects the fans of the sport. I think it negatively affects the athletes of the sport because it's getting harder and harder to win big races. And we're getting to that point where it's so competitive, you kind of have to sell your soul a little bit. And if you're selling your soul for like $20,000 a year, like that's not good for your, like as a professional athlete, like that's just not good for your well-being, like physically and mentally. Like if you're stretching yourself that thin, just to bring the best, like physical, like the best running out of you. And on top of that, you're now worrying about not having enough money for anything.
Yeah.
That's negatively affecting, like it's not good for the athletes. Like these pros deserve to be compensated enough where they can like go to the grocery store and buy, you know, pretty much anything that they want for the sake of eating food properly. Like when has that ever been a hurdle in other professional sports? Like, oh, I can't go to Whole Foods I have to go to,
Trader Joe's,
all the grocery stores that I go to. But it's like the little things that add up to, those negatively affect the professional athletes. And, that's kind of my stance. It's like, just like, it's not enough to do your job correctly. I think that's really what it comes down to, is like, am I making enough to do my job the best I can? And like, all these athletes they're already going to go and do the best that they can. And they're doing it off of this, I'm so thankful that they took a chance on me sort of
Let's
narrative.
not forget what the chance looks like.
Yeah. It's like, there's that narrative. And so they're already, and so I hope that there's a point in this sport where these athletes' eyes are opened to the possibility that they can make more money for what they're doing. Because like, this sport's hard. It trashes your body. Like, I don't know. It's not, I think we have one of these talking points here of like, about burnout and stuff, but like, it's not particularly healthy to be the best ultra runner in the world. Like, if we're looking at it outside of sport, most of being the best at any sport is not the healthiest way to do that sport.
I know that I criticize brands a lot, but I do want to criticize athletes for a second. I think that one of the ways that this scam ends, it's heavily dependent on the athletes. The athletes have to stop the social media theatrics. They have to stop playing along. They can't write it out as if it's more than it actually is that they're getting and all that kind of stuff. They have to reveal the injustice. They have to reveal the disparity, and it's on them to just be more realistic about what is actually going on. Because as long as they make it seem like that, again, that is, they just need to stop. Yeah. I'm going to stop.
Okay. I just had a great, like, we're going to go way back to hypothetical corner, or what if alleyway in some of the earlier longer narcos. So what if a company like Hoka said, all right, we admit, like, we've only been paying like most of our athletes like $20,000. Okay. We're going to fill 5 spots on like the men's and women's side of ultra running. We're going to pay all of them a minimum of $100,000. And, the tryout is going to be in 12 months. How many people pop over from the roads and try and take those contracts? And how many of them take it from what we currently think are great trail and ultra runners? Because
did you just think of that question on the spot?
Yes.
That's a fantastic question.
Because like, what if the current, like, quote unquote top tier of our sport, well, not the very top tier, but like the middle professional tier, what if it really is only worth $20,000 or $30,000 because all the ones who are worth $100,000 haven't been incentivized to even go into trail yet? I mean, we've seen the crossover. I'm not saying every marathoner is going to be great at running ultra marathons, but some of those people who have shown the talent to be, like a, 215 or, a 235 on the ladies' side, like marathoner, that increases the percentage chance or the likelihood of them also being really good at trail and ultra if they apply themselves towards that.
I'm going to bring up a bunch of rural broadband analogies to talk about how cool this idea is. When you think about, like, I used to travel around rural Maine a bunch. I grew up in Maine, and like a lot of parts of that state just did not have like cell phone connection and stuff like that. And I feel like the competition in our sport, this could be like a last mile effort for full competitive potential in our sport. Like, if you put that type of carrot in front of the road running and track populations and anybody in the collegiate ranks who is looking to extend their career beyond college into their 20s and 30s, this is the equivalent of that last mile effort to make our sport what it could really truly be from like a potential standpoint. I think that this is it. I think that we've realized in our sport that like prize money doesn't necessarily talk, but I do believe that guaranteed contracts do talk, and they go a long way in terms of convincing athletes what to do, where to go. I think that you would see so many people come out of the woolworks and try really hard for this. I think it'd be super exciting. And I think that, I think the vast majority of people that come out on top and get the contracts were not established trail runners. That'd be my hot take.
They're random ballers.
They're either random ballers or they're known ballers on the road scene.
Yeah. Yeah. And
like, I bet half of the Hokanaz elite team overnight, leaves and tries out for this.
How much money will it take for a company to say, Cam Levins, I want you to train for 100-mile? Like, he is one of my favorite examples of someone who I think would just crush it on the trails. Like, yeah, I mean, we've heard the stories. The dude just ran 2:05 in the marathon, and like, he has all the grit and like tenacity of some of the best trail and ultra marathon runners in the world.
Cam Levins, I mean, I feel like this would be the final straw for a Des Linden. I think this would be enough of a carrot for her to forego appearance fees at places like Boston. She would give it a go.
Yeah, because I mean, at the time, I mean, I know for her the pay is still better on the roads.
Yeah,
like 100%. But maybe it would just take enough financial security to go in on the trails.
That is such a good question. I feel like we need to tease this out even more in a future episode, and that's a good one to throw out. How cool would it be? Question.
How cool would it be if a brand decided to do that and just said, like, 12 months from now, we're holding tryouts at this race?
Which race is it?
I don't know. I think every brand would pick a different race depending on like which, what, like Hoka is clearly going to try and pick people that could win UTMB. Like Solomon might go for the sub ultra, Golden Trail type, runner. Yeah, I don't know.
I have an idea.
Okay,
I have an idea. Breaking 14 project. Everybody rallies around Western states and they just throw all these road runners against the wall, see which ones break, and they all go out on sub 14 pace and they just try to hold it for the rest of the race.
See, the hard part about that is they have to qualify for Western states.
Well, this goes back to your point about having a separate Western states on a separate weekend.
The elites only.
The elites only.
Yeah,
the Breaking 14 project.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, there's not too many. Well, you could do it at Leadville. The like Operation Takedown Matt Carpenter's record.
Yep.
At Leadville, because they could have, what do they have, 1,000 people at that race?
Yep. Easy.
So maybe that's an easier barrier to entry. I guess the biggest barrier there is the altitude. See, like a perfect race for this sort of scenario would have been like the old North Face 50 mile in San Francisco.
I know.
That would have been an awesome one. Like, I mean, we saw like Hayden Hawks just came out and like smashed it, gave Zach Miller a serious run for his money there. And that was like Hayden's coming out party for, I am a serious trail runner.
I think we were going to talk at some point about comparing like the 2022 U-Roys versus the 2013 U-Roys, because that was the last or the first U-Roy far off in the distance that we had like full top 10 data for, at least readily available on Google. And it makes me wonder, like, I think at least I was going to say that the differences weren't crazy. Like the magnitude difference was, it might be the case that the 2022 folks are better on balance, but like the magnitude of difference isn't crazy. I wonder if you did like this type of competition, it would show how many light years off into the future our sport would evolve in a matter of one race when you put the right athletes into the mix and give them the right incentives.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I would love to see that happen. Did this come up on Twitter? Was this one of your tweets of like throwing the elites from 10 years ago into the races now? How do they do?
Yeah.
I love the opposite idea of that, of like taking all the elites now and throwing them into 2010, 2012, where it's like, you get Tri-Berry or Vanilla Goo, and you get a water bottle that the handheld parts made with a bike tube. No ice bandanas, no max cushion shoes. If you want to cool down, you got to dunk your head in the cooler, go bob for apples, or I guess ice cubes. Which of today's Uroy top 10 is gritty enough to survive back then?
I think philosophically, it makes me wonder, is it easier to time travel into the past or to time travel into the future? Like, which person would have an easier time adjusting? I think my intuition tells me that it's harder to go back in time because you've just gotten so acclimated to these awesome new technologies and amenities, like your baseline less resourceful.
Yeah, but like would some of those people, if they got, the 2010 or 2012 group, if they get thrown forward a decade, will they know what to do with all this new stuff? Or would they just be like, F it, I'm not using it? And then like, because there's a lot of things that.
What are some things that they might not know how to use? Okay,
so I wrote that down. Dang, where's it? I made all my notes bold for a reason. So we're now kind of combining 2 points, because you said like, what are some things currently used by only a few people in trail running that will be mainstream within the next 5 years?
Oh,
and
yeah.
I also reversed that question and said like, what are some things that could have been used 5 to 10 years ago that either very small number of people or nobody was doing, but like the tech was there?
Yep.
The first thing that came to mind was like active cooling. Like they had ice in 2010. Like ice was the thing. It was not utilized well at all. Like one of the few people, like my first experience at Western States was in 2015, and I got to crew for David Laney, and we had a bandana. We would fill it with ice. We'd fold it up, twist it. 3/4 of the ice would fall out. We'd say, F it. He'd tie it on, and then 50 meters down the trail, it's all bounced out. That was pretty much the norm with most of the top runners. Like one person who, like, Hoka had made some hats that had ice pockets in them. They literally fit like 2 cubes of ice. It was a joke.
It was the thought that counts, though.
It was the thought that counts, and it equaled a brain freeze.
That person got fired. There was so much at stake there. That person who made that, they got fired.
Well, yeah. One of the few people that was ahead of their time with cooling technology was Rob Crar. It was amazing watching him get iced down at the aid stations. He does it just like how everyone is doing it now. Very quick, untie the old ice bandana. New one was like sewn up, had 2 pounds of ice. Throw it on. While he's standing there, his arm sleeves were getting stuffed full of ice, and then he was out. Like he was doing it how people are doing it now. And he was like one of the few people who was taking cooling super seriously. And that was like 2015. You go back 5 more years, you see pictures of ultra runners at Western States, and they're all just, none of them have like ice bandanas or anything like that on them. They might eat a popsicle at the aid station, but so that's like one thing that I was thinking that just like wasn't utilized that well, that the tech was there. The other one is just,
that's a really good one.
Like from a fueling standpoint, like the Goose formula hasn't really changed. Like the maltodextrin and fructose, like 2-to-1 blend, like people just weren't doing a great job at eating them that often. It was once every 4 to 5 minutes, maybe once every half an hour, but like no one just thought like, what if I just eat them every 20 minutes or purposefully drink 500 calories an hour of goo mixed into a water bottle? So like, I think for the most part, people were under fueling at a lot of these races, and that's just for lack of knowledge of, the fueling science wasn't quite there yet either. But a lot of the things that I feel like became mainstream, just like the research and the science, like wasn't really even there yet. Whether that's shoes or just better gear or like training, philosophy, coaching, better headlamps.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a good one for you. Well, this is I don't think that this is even being used yet in trail, and it's barely being used in other areas of the running world. So maybe this is in the next 10 years. But have you heard of this wave light technology system that they're using on the track? It replaces the need for a human pacer. It like lights the ground in front of you with your desired pace.
Oh yeah,
and it tells you if you're on it.
I'm very up to date on the wave light tech. And
take that to trail,
dude. But like what? So I don't think there's anyone right now who could take, like, say if you had 100 miles worth of wave lights and you put it along the Western States course. I don't think whoever programs those lights, that's not the most ideal way to run whatever Jim ran at Western States. I don't think it's been figured out yet. Like, I don't think, maybe for splits of even like track 100-mile, there's still two very distinct camps of go out hard and fade or run even. But
or negative.
Yeah. But the science for these distances and the amount of research that's gone in, it's not like the answer isn't there yet.
Interesting. Okay.
So like wave lights would be fascinating.
Where does it stop making sense? At what distance does that technology stop making sense in your opinion?
So, I mean, I think you could 26.2 mile wave light a flat, fast road marathon course for like 2 hours, and it would be hugely beneficial. Because once pacers drop off, which, like, if we're running 2 hours in the marathon, it is hard to find. There's very few pacers in the world. There's very few humans in the world who can come through the half marathon in 60 minutes and not be totally tapped out. If you can do that, you probably would rather just try and win the whole race and just race. And usually in those cases, as soon as the pacers drop off, there's a lag in pace for a couple miles before it picks back up again and people start racing. That's always been the case in track races too, with, world record attempts with pacers. It's so fast, it's hard to find anyone that can take you through halfway. And then once they drop off, you're solo. Having the wave lights, it's a massive advantage. But when you start to throw the variables in there, like using Western States as an example, when you start throwing the variables in of the climbing and the descending, what did Jim run? 1408, 1406? Like, I think there's probably 100 different ways. There's probably 100 different ways to run that time, depending on what kind of runner you are. Whether that's just naturally climbing a little slower and descending faster. What do the wave lights do when you come through an aid station? I don't think that we don't have the answers for the tech of like wave lights yet, but it would be nuts. Like even like on a track 100-mile, if it was paced at the world record, when you just extrapolate the pace and make it linear for 100 miles, is that even the correct way for the pace lights to be going? Like, I don't know. I don't think anyone truly knows the correct answers to that question, but there's enough data points in track and even up to the marathon where they can pretty confidently say, if we have the lights do this and then they do this, that's going to bring out the fastest time for that person. But we're still like so far into the Wild West of trail running where it's like, yeah, it would be all over the place and probably just sabotage more races than not. What would be a super fascinating use of wave light technology is stay ahead of the wave lights. Like the Red Bull does that. That Wings for Life run where everyone starts at the same time all over the world and you just run until the pace car catches you. What if there was a race like that where it's just like, don't get caught. If you get caught, your day's over. Maybe that's the new backyard.
You just reminded me. And this technology, without a doubt, does not exist yet. We're probably like 30 years away. But you know how like they have those hologram concerts, like Michael Jackson has done. Like
Tupac.
Like Tupac has done a hologram concert. What if Strava found a way to create a hologram Jim Walmsley? He starts the race at the exact same time as everybody else, and he just runs his Strava splits hologram Walmsley. make it go viral. Hashtag hologram Walmsley. And he just runs he just runs the entire race at that pace, and runners try to follow that thing.
Yeah. See that you could do that with wave lights. I mean, also for what it's worth, it's just so expensive to even have 400 meters of wave lights and ship them around the world, let alone 100 miles of wave lights through the mountains. Like, can you imagine the power that would, I don't know, just the amount that wouldn't work. But yes, hologram Walmsley, super cool. You see it in swimming with the world record line.
Yes.
And that actually transitions very well into this point of, do you think we are more fixated on great times than competition in our sport? This is going back to a Michael Johnson tweet.
Great follow on Twitter, by the way. Excellent follow on Twitter.
Brilliant mind of the sport of track and field. Former world record holder. He's a smart guy. But he always brings up he correct me if I'm wrong, but he brings up that the sport of track and field is in somewhat of a way killing itself by putting too much emphasis on times and not enough emphasis on head-to-head racing.
Which he says times are a byproduct of competition. They are in effect a stat. So it'd be the equivalent of watching an NBA game, and instead of valuing who won or lost the game, you're fixated on like number of field goals attempted.
Yeah, like if Damian Lillard scores over 50 points this game, regardless of what the final score is, Blazers win.
Exactly.
Like, it's like that. Like,
exactly.
That's stupid. Yeah, it's funny. Like, I have always been in the camp of it's all about the racing. Times will happen when there's good racing. Times will also not happen, and there's still good racing. But I also admit that I definitely still fall into the habit of, like, when we talk about these races, we are all still pretty hyper fixated on like course record, historical splits, looking at the past versus, this year's, cohort of runners. And it's kind of a hard thing to not talk about at the same time, as much as I want to say it doesn't matter. It's like, what else do we have to compare the past to the present?
Yeah. I was trying to think about this before the episode, and one of the things that I came up with is there's sort of two tracks within running. On the one hand, it's a sport. On the other hand, it's something that is such an easy, raw measure of where humanity is currently capable of from like a raw physical standpoint. Like, we're still obsessed with like this is such a measure of like the evolution of our species in a way that like basketball and football and hockey are not. Like, this is such a measure of where we are physically at as a species. And I think that's why people start to get fixated on times over competition, because there are those two tracks and you can't really take either out of the thinking equation.
Totally. Yeah. Cause then there's always, like at the Olympics, the 100-meter dash on the men's and women's side, they always advertise, the fastest man in the world, the fastest woman in the world. And then someone's going to win that race. And then it always jumps to the next question of like, fastest ever. like that always happens. Like, someone's going to win Western States, and then they're going to be like, but was it the fastest that anyone ever did it? And I think where I ultimately land is like, it's fun to talk about the times, but I don't want that to be at the sacrifice of head-to-head racing.
I've always wondered if the fixation on times was also born out of the fact that this is an incredibly individual sport. There's a lot of ego in the sport. There's a lot of self-consciousness in the sport. And one way to maintain your standing and your success in the sport is to fixate on those times. And like, if no matter who won a competition, if they didn't surpass a time from a previous year or era, there's somehow that performance is somehow less than what happened, a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
Yeah, totally.
I've wondered that before. And I didn't say that in the most perfect words, but like, do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. And that's actually a problem going back to the contracts of these athletes. Like in the track, you know, and road worlds, you get, you know, financial bonuses for running times more so than beating people. You know, like it's easier for you as a track athlete to make money by just doing you. You can dodge competition all you want because you'll probably get a little bit more money if you win. But if you win and you run a certain time, like you get a big fat bonus. If you just like, if you win a whole bunch of these races, you some of the races you might, you know, get money for winning them. But like if you win these races and you're not running that fast, people just think, well, the quality of the competition wasn't that good. And like, it's harder to get paid. And that's how like the structure of these contracts have been in the track world, which encourages like dodging competition and just going and time trialing.
Yeah.
I hope we don't see that in trail because the sport just by nature is harder to compare times. Where you just kind of, and I love that because you simply just like, you just need to go win. Like I could care less of like Adam Peterman won Western States last year. Like, yeah, maybe it was slower than what Jim had run previously, but for that particular year with all of the, you know, how stacked the field was, everything actually, you know, really all the things stacking up against Adam for why he shouldn't win. And it's, you know, a lot of people were like, well, how could you say there was things stacking up against Adam for why he shouldn't win? Well, for one, he had never run 100-mile before. And then to just win, like, I think that's so much more impressive than if he ran 14:40 and got second.
Yep, I agree. And I think it'd be great to work on changing the narrative. It's like someone could say, oh, I ran 15:30 at Western States last year. It's like, well, did you win?
Yeah,
you know?
Totally.
Like,
okay, here's the age-old let's run question. Maybe you can throw this up on Twitter or Instagram. Would you rather have an Olympic gold medal or a world record? Like, would you rather break a world record or win an Olympic final?
What would be the equivalent in trail running?
I mean, would you rather
like win UTMB?
Would you rather win Western States in 15:20 or whatever Adam won it in, or get second under the old course record like Jared Hazen did in 2019?
Yeah, well, I do think that's it. I think that's perfect. I think that, you know, the voting folks for UROY definitely valued Adam's win overall over everything else this year.
Yeah, totally.
So I think that folks that are voting on that kind of stuff are sort of in that camp.
Yeah. Speaking of UROY, slight pivot back to the 2013 UROY versus the 2022 UROY class, and remind me again of what your actual tweet that the question that you sent out there was like, if you take the 2013 group, I know it was perhaps we chose 2013 because we could find that top 10 quickly online. What was the actual question?
Give me just one.
Because I did note just a couple of what I believe are like pretty big differences between the 2013 class and the 2022 class.
I said, if you took the top 25 male and female ultra runners from the year 2010 and you teleported them in their prime to the year 2023, what percentage of them would still be considered elite in today's era?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of them are still going to be considered elite in today's era. If you rephrase the question of like, how many of them are winning major races now? I think that, in my personal opinion, I think that answer changes a lot. One thing that I noticed was one of the biggest differences looking at the 2013 UROY class versus the 2022 UROY class is how much more racing the 2013 UROY class did. Like every single person had on average like 8 ultras through the year. In the 2022 class, the average was like 4 or 5. with a couple racing like 7 or 8 times. But that was the norm back then. And I got to do a little bit deeper dive into it, but just initial looking at it back and forth, I actually saw more head-to-head racing now than before.
Are we in agreement, by the way, that if these pro athletes, not necessarily all at the same time, but if each athlete had a defined off season from a performance standpoint, that would serve them incredibly well for subsequent years? Is that like common sense, would you say?
I think I don't know if it's called an off season. I don't know what it's called, but taking the proper amount of time to properly recover after any race will extend your career. I think there was and also like people were over racing, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I don't think that's because I think that's just, you didn't know. Like, I think people are racing less today because they saw what happened when you raced a lot 15 years ago. So, I mean, I think you don't have one without the other. And I think, from a training, like a science and training standpoint, there's more benefits that you might actually be able to grab by racing less, getting in more proper training, and there's less racing your way into shape. That's a term that I kind of feel like I'm hearing less. Like, it's more, I'm hopping into races as like a rust buster, go through the race motions, but I'm not just racing every weekend to get fit. You go and train to get fit, and then you go race to show off your fitness. That's one of the biggest differences that I saw between 2013 Uroy versus 2022. The other one this is just like, we're always giving the Uroy voters a hard time, and they've got to be pretty sick of people like us because
I hope they know we love them.
I
don't mean that flippantly. I mean that for real. Like, I think that they seriously do an important thing.
They had to make some tough decisions, because like Timothy Olsen repeated as Western States champ in 2013. He got 4th at UTMB that same year. I got to double check to see if that was his UTMB Run Rabbit double year.
2013.
Might have been 20. Yeah.
I think 2013. Yeah.
Did he win
Run Rabbit?
Yeah.
I don't know if he won Run Rabbit, but I think that was maybe the most underappreciated 4th place finish at UTMB of all time, because for some reason, and maybe it's just the people that I talk with, whenever we recollect which American men have performed well at UTMB, his 4th place doesn't always get brought up into conversation, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. So Timothy Olsen, he wins Western States again, which maybe after we talk about this will be a great time to transition to one of our other points that's later on, towards the bottom of the document.
Yeah.
He wins Western States again, so he repeats.
Yep.
Very hard to do. Most people, it's pretty unanimously agreed upon that his second win was more impressive than his course record win of the previous year, because of how hot, how brutal it was. He got 5th at Run Rabbit and 4th at UTMB, 1st at Western States, 4th at Transvolcania, 2nd at Tarawera, 2nd at Ray Miller 50, 15th at Lake Sonoma, 1st at Bandera. So much massive racing, and 1, 2, 3 international races on 3 different trips. In what world is that 4th?
I know.
For Uroy? 4th place. He missed the podium.
And that was his 2013 year.
Yeah. That landed him 4th.
At it right now.
That landed him 4th.
Wow. Who were the top 3?
Rob Krar won it that year, which I looking at the results head to head, Rob versus Tim, I understand giving the nod to Rob.
Okay.
John Olsen, who was it more of a road ultra. He won the world 24-hour championships that year, which looking like, and it was then an American record. But I think Nick Curry has since put like 10 or 12 miles on it. So like, that's one thing that's improved a lot in the last 10 years is road ultra marathoning on the American side. And then, Sage Canaday was third with a lot of very, very good results in the 50 mile to 100K range or 50K to 100K range. Like he stayed very much in a lane and like crushed it for like 6 races. And that got weighted higher than Tim Olson, which and thought it was interesting.
Sometimes I wonder if the road and track people that are placed in the top 10, a lot of that's politics and making sure that we acknowledge that part of the sport. And it makes me wonder, it's a little bit of a side tangent, but which top times are easier to take down right now in our sport? The stuff on the road and the track, or the stuff in the on the trails?
Any old road record that was set pre-super shoes is just ready to be demolished.
Yep.
Like, I don't even know what they are, but I know that it's those ones. And it's just a matter of time before it takes someone who is, cares enough to like go for it.
Do you think that the average fan should be more impressed right now by what is happening on the trail scene? So, for example, like a Courtney Dauwalter performance, or what is currently the state of the art on like the road and the track? What's your take there?
You like times or you like competition? What team are you on?
I'm on team competition.
I've always been on team competition, which is why right now, like trail and ultra is more closely bunched competitive. Like I'm like the winners of the races are doing amazing out of this world things. But when you win one race by like 6 hours or one race by 6 minutes, the race where you win it by 6 minutes from like my point of view is much more exciting to watch. Yeah. So that's just, so at the moment, that's trail.
Another question I want to throw out there on our sheet here. Do you think it's harder to get to the top in our sport or to stay at the top as a pro trail and ultra runner these days?
I think at the current scope of the sport, I think it's harder to stay at the top.
Okay.
What do you think? Before I dive into that.
Yeah, my point has a lot of questions, and I'll ask them here. So in order to answer this question, I need to know from both of us, how much of an advantage present day does a sponsored athlete have over an unsponsored athlete? Like, do they have significantly more time, more resources, less stress? Is this tangible enough right now? How much of an advantage, if they have it, does it give them? I would say if it's at least like, let's just throw out a number, 15% better, more advantage, I think that we have to take a serious look at getting to the top as being harder. I do think it will be getting to the top as soon as the vast majority of athletes in our sport that are pro are truly full-time. At that point, I think it will be, but I currently think that it's staying at the top. And I think that this is something that's really interesting about our sport. And I'm actually borrowing this from a Jeff Rose article that I randomly stumbled on like 3 days ago, where he says, what's interesting about our sport is like when you get into your late 30s and early 40s, let's say you're like a 100-miler guy, like you're a Jeff Browning, and you start to lose like 2 to 3% year over year. You cannot hide a 2 to 3% decline in a 100-mile race. Like if you were running 15:30 one year and then you decline 2 to 3% the next year, that's like a 30-minute decline in time at a race like Western States. That takes you completely out of the top 10. Whereas in like team sports, like the NBA and basketball, like if you're someone like Udonis Haslem on the Miami Heat, who's like the ageless wonder, he can hide with 4 other guys on the court and like a lot of his deficiencies can be reduced, but you can't hide as a solo runner in our sport. And so, actually what I just said there makes me think that it will always be staying at the top, but I think that I wanted to make those points about getting to the top too.
Yeah.
I think that is going to get way harder. I just talked myself out of that. Sorry.
As the great Lil Wayne once said, the spot gets smaller and I get bigger. it's harder to stay at the top.
But I think it's harder relative to other sports too.
Yeah, I also, I preface my answer by saying, like, in the current state of the sport, I think it's harder to stay at the top.
Yep.
I think the barrier to entry for our sport from like a professionalism like type level, it's going to get exponentially bigger over the years. Like, even just like, what were all the tools you could utilize with like the knowledge that existed in 2015 to be a professional ultra runner versus now? There's a lot more money you could spend to be a professional ultra runner now. Not that you couldn't spend it before, you just didn't know how to spend it, or that you should have spent it. But now, and I think that number is going to continue to get bigger as the sport evolves, and all these limits continue to get pushed. And that definitely doesn't come in the form of just simply training harder. I think so much of it is actually training smarter. And with we could brainstorm some things. Like, if I had a no budget, if you had no budget to be a professional ultra runner, like right now, I would be working with my sponsor for fully custom footwear for sure. So like, I'm getting a custom last made that is size Brett, which I know is like a 9.5 for my left foot and a 9 3/4 for my right. So that right there is costing like $50,000 for them to build that last. I'm going to get any upper, any outsole, any midsole combination possible. Like, we're just looking shoes right now. Like, but then to get properly custom fitted, like, how many packs have you had that like seriously had zero bounce? Like, what if like a brand could just make that for you? Like, how is that not a thing? And then, like, of course I would have a nutritionist. If we're going no budget, then I'm going full chef too, to make sure that like my nutrition's perfect.
You get an altitude tent, you're sleeping at altitude every night.
I'm going to sleep at altitude when I'm not living at altitude. I'm either going to be at altitude, which would be like a training camp, so that costs money, or I'm going to have my altitude tent and live in a spot down low. You got to make sure that whatever you're training for, you have the tools to simulate all the elements, whether that's heat or cold or mountains. I would want to get like all the like metabolic efficiency testing done. I would want to do VO2 max testing, lactate threshold testing. And you don't do that once. You do it every few weeks to make sure that you're staying in the correct zones when you're training. Probably get a strength coach. You would have your PT, your massage therapist. You'd have your sports psychologist.
I got 2 questions I have to ask you. Remind me that I have a second one, because I think the second one is even better. First question, with all of those things that you just listed out there, is there any athlete in any endurance sport right now that is like, who is the most resource rich endurance sport? So not necessarily making a ton of money, but like they check off like 15 of the 20 boxes you just listed off there.
I guarantee top triathletes and top cyclists in the world are checking all of those boxes, plus ones that I don't know exist.
You think like Lionel Sanders is doing that?
Yep. 100%. Wow. Entire tour teams are doing that. Like, if you watch the tour, they always do like a MTV Cribs of just their bus. And like, they're amazing. Every single one of them has like team education first. They were I think they might have actually changed their team name this year, but last year they did like in the tour, like a MTV Cribs sort of thing. And they said like, this is what we do after a stage is over. They go to the bus, they shower, they go into the fridge, and they grab the baggie with their name on it that has their completely custom to them recovery powder that's been formulated. I think Scratch is their company. So like, the Scratch scientists made like, Finn, for you, this is what you need to drink after the stage. And they're all different for everyone. And then they have a chef that cooks meals accordingly to everyone on the team. And this is just like what they're rolling with at the tour stages. And then they get, when they're all training together, they get, similar, I don't know, lifestyles.
What, in your opinion, I know it's a guess, but what percentage of that resource wealth does the top trail and ultra runner have in our sport? Like a Walmsley or a Killian, like, is it 15% of what Lionel has in the triathlon world? Like, where would you benchmark it at if you had to guess?
I have no idea what the top people.
I think it's low. I think it's
low. I bet it's low. But like, I wonder if can even someone like I feel like Killian Jornet checks all the boxes, or has checked them all at some point, and now gets to pick and choose which boxes he decides to check. But like, can someone like Courtney Dauwalter or Jim Walmsley, are they financially stable enough to make sure that they check all the boxes like the top triathletes and cyclists? I want to say yes, but I think we're literally talking like less than 5 ultra runners on earth that are able to do that.
Yeah, I think I agree. I don't want to forget this other question. Going back to Black Canyon, Anthony Costales beat one of, if not the most professional athletes in our sport, Tom Evans, head to head. Anthony is a teacher. He's a family man. He has other things going on in his life, and he beat Tom Evans, who is regarded as one of the most dialed in, precise professional runners in our sport. He probably is close or in that category of people that leave no stone unturned, check a lot of those aspirational like training boxes. I bring that up because earlier I asked you, like, how much of an advantage does a current sponsored trail runner have over your quote unquote random baller? And what do you think about that? Does that
Yeah.
like, now that does that make Anthony's victory that much more impressive?
No. Can
Okay.
you freaking imagine how much Anthony would have won by if he had all those resources?
So yeah, I mean,
like, that's what I'm thinking of, is like, he's one of the best runners, like trail and ultra runners in the world, in his current training situation.
yeah.
If he can have any training situation he wants, and like, I mean, one thing that does is it just lowers your daily stress levels. Like, Anthony has to think about when he's going to schedule a run in and like work it around his teaching. And he's like, yeah, sometimes I have like 15, 20 minutes in between classes where I can do my strength work, like all that stuff. And to be able to run as well as he did, still having to think about when can, like, it essentially, running is still second in his life from like a career standpoint.
Absolutely.
So like, yeah, I mean, and so that was like one thing I thought, like, for Anthony, I was like, damn, dude.
If now I'm just thinking, what if?
Well, yeah, there's the what if. And part of it too is like also wanting to.
Yeah.
Like it's a big commitment, to put all your eggs in that one basket, which, like, I think Tom does a great job at it. And, the one thing I also don't know, like, I'm not going to make any excuses for Tom, but like, I know it was known before Black Canyon that like Western States was the main goal.
Right.
So it's like, what, we get a rematch in June. Like, we get a rematch between Anthony and Tom.
Yes.
So like, that's one thing I was just like, oh, I don't know anything about Tom's training, what his training was like for Black Canyon. Was he like, was the training block smaller and like purposely making sure he tears it up for Western States? Or was he all in for Black Canyon knowing that he'll be able to go all in again at Western States and he just didn't win? Like, those are questions that he knows the answer to from his like training standpoint. But yeah, I don't really remember what your first question was, because I just went off on the what if Anthony was able to do all that.
Well, I'm forgetting.
What does that say about the sport when
what is
the random ballers can still do that?
Yeah.
I think it's because like we're still at that time. We're still in a time in our sport where like the performances are like still going up by like leaps and bounds. We're not shaving seconds off anymore. Like that race was close, but it still could have been a lot closer. You know, like, did you see the finishing mile of the Tokyo Marathon this past week?
I did.
There was like 12 guys together in a pack with 1 mile to go. Can you imagine if like Western states, there was 9 people coming over Roby Point together?
I wonder, someone out there knows, I wonder what the current record is for the most amount of people at that stage of the race together in a top 10 competition scenario.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Because I know there's been like 2. I know it's been 2
aid station fireball.
Yeah,
I bet 3. I bet there's been people like between the finish line and the top of Roby Point.
Yeah.
Within the top 10, I bet there've been at least 3 before. I could see maybe 4, like when you really stretch that full mile and change.
Yep.
I mean, we've seen 2 people on the track at the same time multiple times. But yeah, so like we're still as competitive as the sport's getting, like there's still room for it to be even closer and for the margins to be even slimmer. Like we're still to the point where we're just like whacking huge amounts of time off these course records. There I go again, talking about time instead of racing. The racing's getting better, but like the times are also coming as a result of it.
I want to emphasize one last point is I want to emphasize what you said about the value of, or the opportunity to lower as much stress in your life as possible in order to become the best runner you can possibly be. I feel like a lot of people are still getting fixated on like, if I become a pro runner and there's X additional hours in the day to just like let my mind wander, am I going to just resort to overtraining? And I would say that it's easier to remove the inclination to overtrain or to find low stress things to get in the way of that risk than it is to somehow de-stress from like the 3 or 4 other responsibilities you have in your life.
Totally. And I think that's where the importance of like the kind of more modern day sports psychologists can be hugely helpful, because yeah, the default is with our sport, oh, if I'm a full-time pro and I have all this time, I should probably be running 200 miles a week.
Yeah.
If you can properly learn how to channel the mind correctly, you will help with those thoughts of, you know, if I'm not doing anything, I'm stupid and useless, because you're not. If you can fully believe that like your recovery is important and, you know, everything that you're doing is important and it's not just about running all the time, that will help with the lowering of the overall stress levels. Because, you know, I've heard it in a lot of your interviews with other, like, oh, you're a professional athlete for so-and-so, you also do this. Do you ever see a scenario where you go full time? Oh, I don't know. It seems too stressful to go all in. It shouldn't. I don't think it should be.
No.
Like it's it's higher pressure, but as a whole, I don't think it should be more stressful.
But
if there's any brand out there that just wants to sponsor me full time so I can just test this experiment and I'll just go be a full-time ultra runner for a couple years, see how much better I get, feel free to reach out, send me a DM. I'll do it. I'll go all in.
I support that.
Would you? What if brand is like, Finn, we'll give you $100,000 a year for the next 24 months.
Okay.
Just go all in on ultra running.
I think that this is something that a brand should do. They should take a front of the middle of the pack, back of the front of the pack runner, and giving them all of the resources that a Lionel Sanders gets in triathlon. See if they can just make this person out-resource and outwork the competition. And how good do they get? How fast?
I've always been so curious. We talked about this on long runs in college of like, if I got plopped in with the Bowerman Track Club and I just got Jerry Schumacher's coaching, or like freaking at the time, Alberto Salazar's coaching, you know, and like just all the resources that they had, how close to 4 minutes in the mile could I become? Like training in college with my current training situation, like not very close. 100% all in as a pro. How much closer could I actually get? Like It doesn't make any
very
sense.
Close. I think very close.
I have no idea. But same question for like professional ultra running. Like, how much better could you get if you just got like, not just someone hands you the money and says like, go do it, because there's way more of that, but like, you get to pick a coach and they help you out with all the stuff. That would be so fascinating. I think we might have just created a new segment of MTV Made.
I love it. And I think that if a brand, some of the most popular shows on Netflix are these reality, and I guess this is for all of the history of cable television, but a lot of the most popular shows are reality TV. What if you plopped this person into this scenario? How would they fare? What if you transformed this person? How would they fare? I think that one way to make our sport interesting to, a general audience is to create content around one of these hypothetical scenarios. I think it would say a lot about what it takes to be good, what you need to be good. I think it'd be fascinating.
Totally. I mean, if we're looking at it from a purely like capitalistic business standpoint, like as Netflix, I'm not trying to take a middle front of the packer and have them win races. I'm trying to take someone who's like never been a runner before and have them finish 100-miler in 24 months. Cause like, that would for blow up the world of trail running. But from like a sub-elite to elite standpoint, I would love to see what kind of jumps someone makes if they get all the resources they need to go for it.
Here's a question on that same thread. Do you think that among the current stable of elite athletes, they think they're there because of natural talent? Primarily. I know it's always a combination, but do you think that they think that they're primarily there because of natural talent, or do you think that they're primarily there? Do you think that they think they're primarily there because of work ethic? Which one do you think it is?
We're putting a lot of words in people's mouths, and that's okay.
Of course.
That's what the Long Run Archives is all about. I think those people think it's all their work ethic and not talent, because that's why they're racing trails in the first place. They weren't fast enough to make it on the track, and then they weren't fast enough to make it on the roads.
So this is like the Tim Tollefson school of thought.
Yeah. Where it's like some of the best trail runners in the world are still just racing track because they can.
That actually begs the question, has there ever been an athlete in our sport that always thought that they were like uber talented and they just happened to land in the trails? Or has it, because I think you're right that the general trend is these folks that, were always hustling to make teams, always hustling to get the qualifying times, all that kind of stuff. Have we yet, besides maybe Killian, have we yet to see somebody that would have been a natural talent wherever they landed?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think we're seeing more of those people, like Ruth Croft.
Yeah.
Super fast runner. Didn't love just the track and road sort of thing. She was teammates with one of my good friends who lives here in Ashland at the University of Portland, and is just like, I mean, so stoked that Ruth has like found her lane of running in trails, because it was like, oh, I knew she was going to be that good. I just didn't think it would be in trails, because she's always had that amount of talent within her. And I see like Jim Walmsley, he's a perfect example of like, he could have been pretty good track road guy. Like he had, pretty good D1 collegiate times, and like could have totally tried to go for it on the roads or the track, but instead went trail. And like, that's why we saw him just smash so many records, because that's just what happens when you take that caliber of athlete. I mean, Hayden Hawks is another one. He had very good track times. Adam Peterman, you take it. For anyone who's interested, go to tfrrs.org. Look at Adam Peterman's college times. Look at Jim Walmsley's college times. It's fascinating how nearly identical they are from 1500 through the 3K steeple through the 5K. Like, and then you throw Hayden Hawks into that mix. You throw Anthony Costales, Jimmy Elam, David Laney, Cole Watson. You throw them all into that mix, and they all are pretty good D1 runners. But then all the people that are better than them decided to give it a go on the track post-collegiately or give it a go on the roads. If we see that next tier of collegiate runner, well, actually, the trail team.
Yep.
Lauren Gregory. She was like one of the names that I'm like so excited. Like Lauren Gregory is a monster of a track runner. And I believe like Lauren Gregory, what she has done on the track in college is better than what like Jim or Hayden, Ruth Croft, like quite a bit better than what any of them did on the track. So, I mean, we're extrapolating from a pretty small sample size, but like we're kind of starting to see it like, who was it? Was it Ryan Raff from NAU?
Yeah. Yes.
Like I'll have to check. He might be actually similar to that Adam Peterman, Jim Walmsley type tier, but perhaps a little bit better. We'll be curious, but yeah, I think, gosh, again, we ramble so much. I don't even remember the starts of the questions, but talent and hard work makes for very good runners. But I don't think we're quite seeing the best of the best talent of runners in the sport of trail as like a regular occurrence. There's still hard work that's beating talent in races. But when you get talent and hard work together, they're going to beat hard work with no talent.
Dude, this has been such a good episode. Do we have time for one more topic, you think?
Yeah, I think we should do one more.
Which one do you want to do? My choice? Okay.
Yeah, your choice.
Let's see. We got the agent one. We've got the pink bike report. We've got
the pink bike report one fascinates me because that one we need to have a call to action.
Yeah, let's do pink bike because I think that the rest of these it should be long run archives number 12. It should be the start of the next one.
And this is gonna preface this with saying, we're gonna do it.
Yeah, we're gonna
follow up from this.
We are gonna do it. We're gonna create a survey. So for context, there's this mountain biking media outlet called Pink Bike, and they released a 2023 salary report that surveyed pro athletes in the industry, asking them how much they make, where the money comes from, whether they think it's fair, gender disparities in pay, all that kind of stuff. And I brought this to you and I was like, man, this is fascinating, cool stuff. You pointed out a couple interesting things. One of the things was they did not list how many respondents there were in this study.
I found the answer.
Oh, you did? Okay.
152 professionals. They pretty much went down the list by ranking. So that is what skews some of these results is they reached out to the top from number one down until they decided they had enough data. So I don't know if they reached out to the top 200, top 300 by world ranking in mountain biking, but that's where the results came from. And there actually was a little link to a follow-up side article to the survey that said
gotcha.
We understand it was not a mandatory survey. It was anonymous, but we understand that there's probably the people who filled out the survey or the people who didn't fill out the survey are going to skew the answers because they might actually be the ones who are against the status quo of where cycling currently is. There's more of a trend of people who might be happier in their current situation, especially at the top of the sport, who filled out the survey. So
gotcha.
They kind of acknowledge that and maybe that's true, maybe that's not, but
is this more representative than you thought it was initially or less?
I was hoping that the number was going to be bigger. They surveyed 5,000 quote unquote pros in cycling, but for one, it was just mountain biking. So that's just one small, category of the sport of cycling. So that already cuts the number down because now you're looking at what money is in mountain biking. There's a lot of money in mountain biking, but how much of that is converted to how much of the top elite of mountain biking converts to sales for mountain biking. You know, I'd be curious to see what the companies at like Canyon, Specialized Trek, what their formula is for elite sponsorship dollars to overall sales versus a company like Hoka, Salomon, Adidas, Terex, because they have the answers to those questions. Like if we pay someone this much, it generates this much sales. Like that's kind of the formula. Yeah, the numbers were interesting. And even within like, again, I have no idea for like, I assume the top road cyclists are making more money than the top mountain bikers, but I actually don't know the answer to that. But you know, what's something that you found interesting about the survey?
A couple things. I mean, again, I know that there's a lot to be desired in terms of the representativeness of it, but a couple stats that stood out to me. The first, 33% of survey respondents were making over 50K a year, which is at the very least lower middle class income just based off the sport alone. That I know that you said that the sport has a lot of money in it. I don't know anything about pro mountain biking. That seemed like a lot to me because I feel like if you used 50K as a benchmark in our sport, I would guess that less than 5% are making over 50K. So that was interesting. 20% of the male athletes reported making over six figures. That felt like a lot to me. I bet there's maybe 3 or 4 male athletes in our sport that are making that much money. And then these next two stats, they seem to cancel each other out. 61% felt that their income depended on performance, so race results. 61% also said that their income depended on creating content. So, you know, being more of a social media figure.
Or a lot of people said they needed both. Like I feel financial pressure to perform well and make TikToks.
Yeah. So
one number that something that I thought was fascinating. So 8.7%, you know, the question was, what were your total earnings from mountain biking last year? 8.7% said 500,000 US dollars or more. Now knowing that there was 152 in this who answered the survey, that's 13 people. 13 people made $500,000 last year racing mountain bikes. There definitely were not 13 people last year in the sport of trail and ultra who made over $500,000 last year racing. Like from a money standpoint, our sport is way behind mountain biking.
Yep. Well, we'll do one sec. Oh, Jimmy, shower. Jimmy, she's in the shower.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No worries. Yeah, a couple things I want to say. The first, I think we should do a call to action here. So there was a similar survey done in our sport via iRunFar in 2017. I think it was Gina Lucrezi from the Trail Sisters that put out a survey asking people, you know, what is the state of the sport from a sponsorship standpoint? I think it would be kind of cool for us to send something out ourselves. I would want to go back and look at that questionnaire. I don't necessarily want to reinvent the wheel, but I'm sure that some things have changed. And I think, maybe at this point we know we have the contacts for enough pro athletes where we could get a similar sized survey out there. And I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, in my pitch for why you athletes should fill this out is I believe that us having the anonymous answers to this survey will help grow the sport on the professional side more. Like your contract will benefit from taking this survey. Like your place in the sport will benefit from taking this survey.
Yep.
We have not written the survey. We will figure out the proper questions and we will figure out a way to anonymously, allow you to anonymously answer it. But, you know, this is like purely just for gathering knowledge of the sport. So we can, we're going to be that middleman.
100%. Yeah, we got to find a way to like, there's a bunch of technical stuff on the back end that I'd be interested in, like limiting the same respondent from inputting like, you know, more than one time. So like maybe capturing IP addresses or something like that, but really trying to get a good solid understanding of where things are at in the sport. Because, yeah, like you said, it's going to help people at the bargaining table and stuff like that.
Would someone really do that? Fill it out multiple times? Like, there's got to be a little bit of honor system to that.
I know.
Because it's not like we're going to make it public.
No.
Like, I think we should we can't hand deliver the survey, but like, we will email the survey to everyone, or at least the link to it, where then once they fill it out, their responses will get collected. Like, we can do that with a Google form, and make it anonymous. I think that would be super fascinating. And then we will talk about it. I mean, we could make an article about the data as well as talk about it on the Long Run Archives. But I think there's enough data points out there that can be gathered where we can draw a little bit of a picture of the scope of at least like US or North American trail and ultra running in terms of like how little are you selling your soul for to perform well in this sport?
Yep. Awesome. Well, Brett, I feel like this has been a kick-ass episode, covered a lot of good ground, and we got a lot of good topics per usual to carry over into Long Run Archives number 12 next month. Any parting thoughts, any final thoughts before we go?
Oh, this was a good one. Like we actually we didn't talk about that many like current news type things in terms of like race results, which I think is kind of cool. That there's still like this many other weird things to talk about. And I don't know, maybe we'll never actually run out of those sorts of things, but like to go 2 episodes now and like finish off some things from the previous episode, add things to this one, but now not get to the end. Like we've got a good formula going for
it's so true.
Long Run Archives.
And I'm not sure if every creator out there wonders this, but I think at the start of any creative endeavor, you wonder, like, is there a finite amount of ideas or raw creative material you can work with? But I think you realize that over time, as you just take at bats, like as we have 12 episodes of this, under our belts, the ideas just keep rolling on. And I feel like there's going to be weird combinatorics, and it's a moot point.
If there ever comes a time when we've run out of, things to say for the Long Run Archives, the sport is dead.